There's no shortage of advice about starting out in video. Most of it's pretty well intentioned, and a lot of it is really technically correct. But I think a lot of it also places the emphasis in slightly the wrong place. What tends to dominate those conversations are tools, terminology, and also speed. How quickly you can look legitimate, how fast you can close the gap between where you are now and where you think you're supposed to be. Cameras get released, opinions calcify almost instantly, and suddenly it can feel as though there's a moving baseline for what counts as being serious, or capable, or worth paying attention to. What gets discussed far less is a simpler, more uncomfortable question. What actually makes someone competent enough that paying clients trust them with real work? Not just admired, and not just some sense of self-validation, but genuinely trusted. Because if your aim is to eventually make a living with a camera, even a modest one, that's a threshold that really matters. And crucially, the fastest route towards that isn't usually better kit or more sophisticated lighting setups, but it's a small set of transferable skills that can compound surprisingly quickly once you start paying attention. Those skills don't make for flashy thumbnails, and they're harder to package for YouTube, harder to sell, and harder to point at as a sort of milestone benchmark of arrival, but they will allow you to become useful sooner, to take on responsibility earlier, and to move from enthusiastic about the craft into a paid role without having to wait for permission or perfect conditions, which in real life almost never present themselves. So in other words, this isn't about the most exciting way to start, it's about the most effective one, in my opinion. One of the most unhelpful ideas that people absorb early on is that learning the craft of video requires a specific kind of tool, a particular camera, a particular lens, a particular rung on some imaginary kit ladder. In practice, almost everything that actually matters can be learned using literally whatever you already have. A phone, an old camera, a new camera, a borrowed lens, a fixed lens, a zoom. If it allows you to frame an image, position yourself in relation to a subject, and make deliberate decisions about what's included and excluded, that kit is enough. The fundamentals don't care what captured them. Composition behaves the same way, light behaves the same way, timing behaves the same way. What changes isn't the rules, but how much friction exists between you and the act of making a decision. The more steps there are between noticing something and recording it, the easier it becomes to hesitate, to defer, or to tell yourself you'll come back to it later. That's why people can often make their fastest progress early on. There's a directness to working with a constrained, limited suite of tools that forces engagement. You can't solve problems by shopping your way out of them. This matters professionally more than it might sound. On real jobs, things change, plans shift, locations don't behave as expected, the people in front of the camera rarely do what's rehearsed. Being able to work with what's available rather than what you'd ideally like is one of the fastest ways to become dependable. And importantly, the person that's dependable gets the work. If you want to see what I get up to between episode releases on YouTube, go and have a look at my Instagram where I'm Jack Filmed. There you'll see life on the Cornish coast, a little bit of life-saving shenanigans, and rigs that never make it to completion. You'll probably notice that I'm fairly relaxed about using terms like video making, and filmmaking interchangeably. That's deliberate on my part, not because there aren't contexts where those distinctions matter, there are, but because early on that distinction often is a bit of a proxy for legitimacy rather than a discussion about the craft of capturing video. If you're pointing a camera at something that matters to you, making decisions about framing, light, timing and movement, and then shaping that material into something that communicates with another person, you're doing the work. The craft doesn't suddenly arrive when the vocabulary changes. Nobody suddenly becomes more capable because they've chosen the correct label. Competence is built through repetition and judgment as opposed to terminology. A pretty eye-opening example of this dynamic has played out recently around the Nikon ZR, specifically around whether it counts as a cinema camera and what that designation is supposed to imply. What's been striking isn't the disagreement itself, but how emotionally charged the conversation has become. And it tends to polarize pretty quickly. Acolytes on one side, skeptics on the other, both arguing over legitimacy, both implicitly trying to secure a position on the serious side of some imaginary divide. I'm absolutely not immune to that, and I've weighed in myself on more than one occasion. It's an interesting discussion sometimes, and especially if you spend a lot of time thinking about cameras, it can be genuinely hard to resist. But when you step back from it a bit, what's striking is how little of that debate actually advances anyone's ability to make better work. Very little of it is about judgment. Very little of it is about timing, exposure, or storytelling. Most of it is about in-group, out-group, and reassurance. About wanting the thing that you're using, or aspiring to use, to validate the direction that you're headed in. That anxiety is totally understandable, especially when you're starting out, but it's also largely a bit of a dead end. No label will resolve it, and no category cures it. Only proficiency in the craft does. Also, I've got to acknowledge something else here as well, particularly given the fact that I'm now part of this noise ecosystem as well. By putting cameras on YouTube, by talking about them, reviewing them, comparing them, even trying to be thoughtful and measured about it, I'm still participating in what you might fairly describe as the camera consumer industrial complex. I'm contributing to the attention, I'm adding to the discourse, and however careful I try to be, that inevitably feeds the idea that progress is somehow tied to kit acquisition, and that clarity arrives with the next piece of gear released, and that just maybe legitimacy might be found one purchase further down the road. I can't pretend that I entirely sit impartially outside of that system. I don't. I enjoy cameras and I enjoy thinking about them. I've made plenty of videos where the object itself is the starting point for the conversation. But I think it's important, especially if you're starting out, to recognize the difference between talking about tools and developing competence. One can be really interesting, but the other is essential. And it's very easy, particularly online, for the former to masquerade as the latter. Cameras are easy to talk about. Learning to see is much slower, much less visible. It trends more poorly on social media. The thumbnail isn't as attractive. So that packaging is far more difficult. And that's partly why it matters more. If I had to isolate one technical skill that genuinely separates people who progress from people who stall, it wouldn't be color, codecs, systems, or lenses. It would be exposure. Not exposure as a simple list of settings, but exposure as a way of thinking, learning to recognize what's happening in front of you and predicting how the camera will respond, making a decision and then checking whether you were right. That loop, observe, decide, verify, is foundational, and it's the point at which you stop treating the camera as something that reacts for you and start treating it as something you're actively directing. I should interject here that I'm still very much a student of exposure myself. You'll hear highly experienced cinematographers talk about contrast ratios, precise lighting relationships, and formal lighting theory that sit well beyond my own technical comprehension at this stage. What I am able to do, and what I found genuinely useful as an operator, is make deliberate decisions based on what I find aesthetically pleasing in the moment. Reading light with my eyes, understanding how far I can push an image before it will fall apart, and choosing a direction rather than just deferring endlessly to either automation or indecision. And that ability alone, to commit to an exposure choice and understand its consequences, goes a long way in real-world situations. It means you're no longer surprised by your footage when you get it into the edit, and you start to recognize patterns. You begin to trust yourself. And when you start to understand exposure at that level, you stop operating the camera so reactively. You're no longer hoping that the image works, you're anticipating how it will behave. That shift is subtle, but it's also profound. From a professional standpoint, this is where reliability starts to form. It's what allows you to walk into unfamiliar environments and remain composed, because you understand cause and effect, rather than trying to rely on some kind of recipe. Clients may never quite be able to articulate it, but they can sense and feel that competence immediately. Before worrying about briefs, brands, or portfolios, it's worth spending the time documenting your own life. Not because it's content, not because it's strategic, but because it removes performance from the equation. When the stakes are personal rather than professional, that gives you enormous freedom to experiment without any trepidation. You can follow moments that don't have an obvious outcome, you can let scenes breathe and then go nowhere, you can make mistakes and repeat them without any consequences whatsoever. And that's how you learn how moments actually unfold, how people enter and leave a space, how long something really lasts, and how much coverage you actually need to make an edit work. You begin to understand rhythm, not as some kind of textual theory, but as something you actually feel while cutting. And this kind of filming builds an archive that's more valuable than it looks at the time, not because it's somehow especially aesthetically impressive, but because it's got this familiarity. And when you filmed your own life enough, very little about filming other people feels alien. And critically, that repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds confidence. If your aim is to make a living with video, that confidence matters more than you might realize. It's what allows you to make decisions under pressure without freezing or overthinking, and it allows you to keep working when the plan inevitably changes. And clients don't care where that confidence came from, they only notice that you have it. Or, absolute worst case scenario, they notice that you don't. Lenses of course matter, it's just I think they matter a bit later than people want them to. Early on, changing lenses often substitutes for changing ideas. It's far more useful to understand what you're drawn to visually, how distance, framing, and perspective alter meaning, before multiplying your options. Restriction sort of accelerates learning. One focal length forces you to move, it forces you to commit, it encourages problem solving that isn't quite so dependent on equipment. And once you've developed intent, once you know why you're choosing a particular perspective, lenses stop being the object of aspiration and just start becoming tools. That's when they can earn their place. That's also the point where some of the louder lens debates start to make a bit more sense, and a bit less difference. The ongoing conversation around spherical versus anamorphic, or the fairly heated talking points in 2025 around open gate modes and whether you're somehow wasting a sensor by not using the full image area, are a great example of this. Those discussions can definitely be interesting, and in the right context they matter, but early on they're just another way of outsourcing confidence. Whether you're shooting spherical or anamorphic, cropped or open gate, the underlying questions remain the same. Where do you put the camera? What do you include? What do you exclude? And why? Until you develop a clear sense of intent, those format choices tend to just add complexity without aiding clarity whatsoever. Once you've developed that intent, they become genuinely useful options, creative decisions rather than identity statements. All of this starts to look very different once the goal shifts from learning the craft to earning from it. Clients never ask if you're a filmmaker or a video maker. They don't care where your camera sits in an online hierarchy, and they're rarely interested in how closely your setup resembles something they've seen online. They care whether you turn up, see clearly, and deliver something that works for them. That usually means being calm rather than clever, it means making sensible decisions quickly, and it means knowing when to simplify rather than to escalate. And it also means being able to adapt when the conditions aren't what you expected. That sort of reliability isn't as glamorous as a new body or lens. It isn't announced or determined by terminology, and it doesn't arrive the moment you buy a particular piece of kit. It's built slowly, through repetition, attention, and a willingness to focus on proficiency rather than some notion to yourself of what legitimacy might mean. So if your aim is to make a living with video, even a modest one, this is the work. Becoming dependable, becoming useful, becoming someone other people feel safe handing responsibility to. And the bad news is there's no shortcut to that. No terminology or label resolves it. No specific camera nor tool grants it. But if you're prepared to spend the time with the camera rather than waiting for some permission from someone online, and if you prioritize judgment over posturing, your competence will accumulate. Steadily, sometimes imperceptibly, but one day people will trust you with real work. And for me, in video, that's what actually matters. If anything I've said today has resonated or struck a chord, please hit the like button, leave me a comment saying as such, and subscribe. Those are the kind of signals YouTube looks for to help suggest the video to other people for whom it might have some utility. I'm Jack. Whatever this is, I'm calling Western Approaches. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.